Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Warlock review for Knights of the Frozen Throne. With me, I have Pandemonia here,
What's up?
and a few disclaimers. First of all, this is before the expansion launches, well, at the time of recording at least, so this is speculation without any real hands-on testing of these cards yet, or these decks. And we're going to be giving our opinions of the cards on in terms of playability on a 1 to 5 rating, with 5 being most playable. You're going to see it in almost every deck. 4 being, or 5 sort of, you're going to see it in every deck, your primordial glyphs, those kind of things. 4, you're going to see it in most decks, but occasionally it might not find play in some specific kind of archetypes. 3, it'll see play in some more fringe archetypes. 2, kind of unplayable, probably just doesn't have the support at this point. And 1, it's probably just super unplayable. And even with the right support, probably wouldn't see play. Okay, so uh, getting through that, we're going to be starting with the new Death Knight card for Warlock. So the Death Knight card is Blood Reaver Gul'dan, and like all the Death Knight cards, it comes with 5 armor and a Battle Cry effect when you play it. Uh, Blood Reaver Gul'dan's costs 10 mana, is a legendary, and the Battle Cry reads Summon all friendly demons that died this game. So much like an N'Zoth effect, but for demons. And with that also comes a new hero power. The hero power is Siphon Life. Siphon Life reads Lifesteal, deal 3 damage. So basically, deal 3 damage, gain 3 life. That's a pretty good seeming hero power, especially considering Warlocks will usually tap themselves. With life tap, will usually reduce their hero power, reduce their health pool a lot in order to get sort of card advantage. What are your thoughts on Blood Reaver Gul'dan?
It's a card that, in theory, it sounds great. So playing 10 mana, getting back all your demons, it sounds like it's amazing. Uh, increase your board. The problem though, and the new hero power is obviously bonkers. It's 2 mana, deal 3 damage, gain 3 life, I think, or
Yeah,
deal
yeah,
3 damage, life steal.
yeah,
Which is obviously a really strong hero power. But the problem though is if you look through the demons that are currently in standard, you know, there's, I don't see there aren't exactly a lot of very strong demons. And especially if you're looking when you're playing like in Zoth, you usually want to get a few taunts back. And now if you look at
yeah.
the demons, like specifically, if you look at the demons with taunt, you're stuck with Void Walker, Foul Guard, and Lakari Foulhound, which
Yeah.
so Void Walker is a pretty weak taunt. Lakari Foulhound, the discard twos can be quite risky, and Foul Guard, destroying one of your mana crystals is obviously not exactly very strong either.
Yeah.
The strong demons are your Jaraxxus quite Doom Guard, Abyssal Enforcer, Dread Infernal. So the thing is, I'm not sure if there's enough super good demons for this to be good.
Yeah, one of the new demons is quite good, I think, but we'll get to that a bit later. Really, the big thing is, as you mentioned, with like these N'Zoth type effects, bringing back all kind of minions of a certain type or mechanic that have died this game, what you really want is you want that to have some kind of board impact, because by itself it doesn't. And in order to actually have that board impact, as you say, it needs to bring back taunt minions, or something that is directly affecting the board. Otherwise, your opponent can just go face and kill you. And even though this gives you 5 armor, this late in the game, 5 armor is probably not going to be enough to save you in most scenarios.
Yeah, you might
So,
just be dead.
yeah, so Blood Reaver Gul'dan, as you say, really does need to bring back taunts, and that is where it becomes a bit awkward. Lakari Fellhound is kind of the standout there as a 4 mana 3/8 taunt, but with that battle cry of discarding 2 cards, it can leave you in a bit of an awkward scenario. There's obviously the terrible anti-synergy scenario where you actually discard Blood Reaver Gul'dan himself when you play the Lakari Fellhound, and then your game plan can go a little bit out the window.
A
But
little bit up. No.
yeah, but if you're willing to take that risk, and it is a big risk when playing what would have to be a kind of control deck with cards like Lakari Fellhound that force you to discard. If you're willing to take that risk, then Blood Reaver Gul'dan can maybe sometimes work out. Um, and as you
Yeah.
mentioned, the hero power is really one of the big payoffs. Basically, the fact that you're going to be gaining 3 life every turn, never mind just dealing 3 damage, is sort of paying you back for using that life
Hero
tap hero
power
power
aggressively.
throughout the game. Yeah.
And the fact
So
that, yeah, you're hopefully going to be able to clear the board and still be alive afterwards. But the kind of the turning point as to where this card is good is, can you play the turn you play it? Can you still stay alive? Because
Yeah.
obviously, like afterwards, if you're still alive afterwards, you're probably in a very good spot, right? Because you then clear. You then have, let's say, the following turn you have your 10 mana. You've
Yeah.
got 2 mana to kill something. You can play stuff, and then you probably can stabilize from that. But the question is, it's the turning point of, are you alive?
Mm.
you know, to maximize that hero power.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other demons that does help with that is Doomguard. Also, obviously has the drawback of the discard in order to play it the first time round. But that is another great demon to bring back, right? Because it has charge, and that's pretty important because you can actually impact the board like that. And if you think of Blood Reaver Gul'dan bringing back simply Lakari Fellhound and Doomguard, it's actually a pretty strong effect, right?
Yeah.
It's not that bad, and the fact that you then are sort of upgrading your hero power as well is pretty good. I think maybe you could think of Blood Reaver Gul'dan as a tech card for Zoo in a really long series, right? Like in like tech card against control, but I mean you could also just tech with the quest, and that was never really a thing. Not that
yeah.
Zoo, to be honest, is really much of a thing right now. Anyway, that's sort of a big issue. I think that like even if Blood Reaver Gul'dan was maybe playable in a Zoo deck as an ultimate finisher, then even then you'd still be stuck in a scenario of, well, that's like Zoo's not really playable right now because, to be honest, Zoo just kind of loses the early game, which is supposed to be its strength. So yeah, ultimately, I'm gonna give Blood Reaver Gul'dan a 2. I think that especially at 10 mana, it just makes him very awkward to play and sort of have much impact with. You can't even use the hero power the turn you play him to at least deal 3 damage to something. So I think that's a big negative on his behalf. I think summoning all demons is pretty powerful, but we really haven't got the greatest set of demons to support this, I don't think, right now.
I
And
mean,
that
in the
that is a
meta
big
with,
issue.
I mean, like if we look back to a standard a while ago, if we think back to Morganis and Voidcaller, that's when you can go, okay, Morganis, would be pretty busted. Voidcaller would be pretty good. You can start going, that would be pretty decent.
Yeah,
But
I mean, Mal'Ganis is the big thing there is that it makes your hero immune, so it essentially has that kind of like taunt effect,
yeah,
basically. But yeah, even then, Blood Reaver Gul'dan, a pretty slow card, and I don't think we're gonna see too much of Blood Reaver Gul'dan. What would your rating for Blood Reaver Gul'dan be?
two heading towards a one. I
Yeah,
think. Like once again, it's one of those cards that objectively seems great. It just doesn't seem like it has the support.
yeah. Okay, and then moving on to the next legendary for Warlock for this expansion, a somewhat debated card is Blood Queen Lanathel. So Blood Queen Lanathel is a 5 mana 1/6 with lifesteal, and she has +1 attack for each card you've discarded this game. So obviously this is meant to be a card to help pay off the discard synergy that we see mostly in like Zoo decks, I would say.
Yeah,
And lifesteal is pretty powerful for Warlock in particular if you're using your hero power a lot. And if you think about it, lifesteal in a sense there is a way to mitigate the fact that you're losing resources by discarding because you can replenish those resources with a life tap, hero power, and then regain the life back with Blood Queen Lanathal. The big issue is Blood Queen Lanathal, is mostly effective later in the game then. She's really not a 5 mana card if you think about it, because it's unlikely
yeah,
you're going to get to 5 having discarded enough and lost enough life for her to really be meaningful. And if she does come down later in the game, she needs to be pretty impactful to really be able to do much, right? With 6
yeah.
health, what do you really want? You want like a 5/6 bare minimum, and then you have to discard quite a few cards. And discarding cards in any kind of deck like that could be an issue for
Very
Blood Queen
risky.
Lanathal. Yeah. Not to mention the obvious issue with like Blood Reaver Gul'dan as well. You can just discard Blood Queen Lanathal, and that can hurt you. There are ways to bring Blood Queen Lanathal back, at least with the Cruel Dynamancer from the previous expansion. Unlike Blood
Yeah.
Reaver Gul'dan, who you couldn't bring back at all because it is not a minion. So I think Blood Queen Lanathal is a little bit better than people anticipate because of the lifesteal, but I think you're very much more on the opposite side here. For
I think it's yeah, like like covered. It's like with these sort of cards, which say have one opponents want to, like, you've always got to look at it from the point of, okay, as a 5 mana, 6 health, those are constant. You've got to ask yourself, what does the stats need to be, to be good or playable? And immediately, like you said, 5 mana, 5/6 is kind of where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least. And so,
Well, I think it's possible as a 5 mana 4/6 with lifesteal,
okay, 5 mana, okay, let's say
but
5
because of the
mana.
lifesteal, right? If it
But
didn't have lifesteal, then yeah.
still, that means you need to have discard 3 cards, and in a control game, the reason why you put a lot of cards in control decks is usually to stay alive. So it's going to be like those cases where people soul fired and discard their Reno Jackson.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit awkward.
I mean, Soulfire did still see play in those decks though. So, sometimes maybe the effect is
But that
powerful
was
enough
just
that you
discard
can get
one.
away
Now
with.
you're discarding 3 cards, right?
Sure, sure. Obviously, Blood Queen Lanathal doesn't have to be in your hand to get the buff, and that is an important thing. But ultimately, I actually think Blood Queen Lanathal will probably only really see play as another top end for Zoo, for like discard Zoo, right? It enables you to refresh your hand a bit later into the game where maybe other decks can punish you for life tapping. But ultimately, I don't think Zoo is particularly playable. So for me, even though I think Blood Queen Lanathal is actually better than a lot of people would anticipate, I think that Blood Queen Lanathal is probably only a 2. I think she might be one of the sleepers for me. Like, might be one of the kind of cards that can actually force Zoo back into the game. But
You think this is Zoo?
ultimately, yeah,
You like this card?
I actually think
No?
I think it's more a Zoo card than a control card, to be quite honest, because
Yeah, I thought it was the exact opposite.
that's where you really get most of your good discard cards to go with it. Otherwise, in the control deck, you'll see one of the decks I built does have Blood Queen Lanathal and is a control deck, but I think you kind of struggle a lot of the time. And, I think you're just kind of thinking of lifesteal as a control mechanic, and I don't think it is necessarily a control mechanic.
Yeah, fair
I think
enough.
lifesteal is often often best in a race scenario. And in
Okay,
this
yeah.
case, with Warlock, it allows you to just keep tapping into the late game, which can sometimes be a bit of a concern as Zoo in another matchup against, let's say, another mid-range or aggro deck.
Okay,
So,
okay, I can see that.
so that's kind of where I see maybe Blood Queen Lanathal. I think she's a 2, maybe a 3, and if Zoo becomes viable, I think that helps her a lot, but I don't think she'll be played in every Zoo deck even then. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I see Blood Queen Lanathal. Yourself?
I'm seeing it as like a 1 to 2. Like I'm not buying it.
Okay, fair enough. I can definitely see why you would say that. Like, my first reaction as well is kind of like it doesn't seem great having to discard all these cards. There is obviously the scenarios in Zoo as well where you can discard something like Clutch Mother Zavas, get it back, kind of thing, and then it can
Yeah.
work a bit there.
Like,
But
and how did Clutch Mother work out for you?
no, Clutch Mother Zavas didn't really work out. But I think to be honest, that's a largely to do with the failings of Zoo in the current meta rather than Zoo is
Okay.
inherently a terrible deck or that the discard Zoo is inherently terrible. I think that the biggest issue is that Zoo kind of just loses to your Shamans and Token Druids or your Token Shamans and Token Druids in
They do
particular that
zoo
just
things better.
they do
Like that's
do
the
things
issue,
better
right?
and like they also it's Freeze Mages still decent, and that still beats Zoo. Although I think that matchup got a bit better for Zoo. But yeah, anyway, so I think there's just a lot of decks that do Zoo things better than Zoo right now, and that's the big problem for Zoo.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's could be a problem.
yeah. So next, moving on, we have Treachery, a 3 mana Warlock epic spell which reads: choose a friendly minion and give it to your opponent. So, what are your thoughts on Treachery?
It's one of these cards that, to the sort of, let's say, more innovative deck builders, you immediately get quite excited because this is, it's a wacky, it's a crazy, it's a unique card. We haven't seen anything like it. And I mean, there's similar cards, from my days in Magic. And now, obviously, the whole point of these things is, you want to give something bad to your opponent, right? Like that seems to obviously be the would be the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
Is you want to give, let's say, like I think the Ticking Abomination or a Doomsayer. Those are the kind of the sort of combos that stand out that you might. But I don't know, would it be consistent enough? I mean, I suppose Treachery plus Doomsayer, it's like Frost over Doomsayer, right?
It is, except it's worse because Well, it's worse in some ways. So it's
Well,
worse
it's better because
because
it's immediate.
yes, but it's worse because gives your opponent the first chance to develop on the board after the Doomsayer. And that's one of the biggest things about Frost Nova Doomsayer is that you can very often force your opponent to skip a turn, whereas with Treachery Doomsayer, the Doomsayer activates at the beginning of their turn, and therefore they actually get their whole turn to develop again. So
Oh, I see what you're saying.
that's one of
Yes.
the big problems with Treachery Doomsayer. The the sort of pro of Treachery Doomsayer is that it's immediate, so there's no way they can play around it.
They can't
But
silence it. They can't.
yeah, devolve the Doomsayer
Yeah.
or anything like that. But ultimately, I think when Frost Nova Doomsayer goes off, it's just far better than Treachery Doomsayer.
Yeah. And also the problem is like treachery. Thinking with treachery with what's that card? I'll just say now. Treachery with the uh, what's a ticking abomination also
Oh yeah,
requires you to
to
like
kill the ticking
kill the
abomination.
yeah the boss. So
Yeah,
that's also the problem is like, that's like a 3-4 card combo, right?
yeah. I think it's a neat idea, but ultimately, I think these cards are pretty terrible, and I'm gonna give it a one.
Yeah, I'm also gonna give it a one. Like I think I even put into a deck that I'm trying to build, but like
Yeah,
realistically,
no.
no.
Realistically, it's just a no. I mean, only in a control deck where you need to do the Doomsayer thing is it maybe sometimes good, but
Yeah,
ultimately, even in that, I think it's probably better to clear the board rather than like in other ways maybe. So, it's just so one-sided. Whereas Frost Nova as well is just better because you can use it in different scenarios. Whereas Treachery, you have to pair it with the Doomsayers. So if you have two Treacheries and two Doomsayers in your deck and you use one Doomsayer early, your second Treachery is dead.
yeah,
So that is another big issue with Treachery when comparing it to Frost Nova Doomsayer. It's certainly nowhere near that kind of combo. Okay, and then next we have Gnome Feratu. So Gnome Feratu is a 2 mana 2/3 epic minion for Warlock, obviously, and it has Battle Cry. Remove the top card of your opponent's deck. Oh, that's crazy! You can hit their Antonidas, you can hit their combo things. That's so good, right? Right,
yeah.
Pandemonia? That must be good.
Yeah, like obviously, like in all these things, there's going to be that clutch. There's going to be that video where it's
The
absolutely
Trollden
clutch. Right?
highlight.
Yeah, but the thing is, like ultimately, and the reason why cards like Foul Reaver saw play was instead of thinking it as removing your card, you just think of it as how often does your deck go to fatigue? Very rarely. And all you think of it is this card you removed is a card you didn't draw. So like if you think of it like that,
Yep.
it's a case of does it actually do much?
Yeah, I
It's a two
agree.
minute 2-3. So yes, the time you remove the Antonidas, the electros, you're gonna feel amazing, right? You're gonna go, oh my goodness, that's great. But ultimately, you can just think of it as imagine in a different game, they just didn't. The Antonidas was just in the bottom 10 cards. They weren't gonna see it anyway.
Yeah. Or if you think about it, sometimes you remove a spell they don't want. You remove something else, and then you actually get them closer to their combo. So as many times as there's a payoff, it's more often than not a payoff, right?
Yeah,
And therefore, like I think Gnome Feratu is basically a 2 mana 2/3. The battle cry is irrelevant. Honestly, don't think that it'll ever
yeah,
matter. Like there will be the Trollden highlights, but ultimately the card is terrible. And what we've learned from other card games is that mill effects are ultimately pretty bad unless you can do them a lot. We even see that in
exactly.
Hearthstone with like Cold Light Oracle, giving your opponent cards and let's say burning cards when you can do it with Cold Light Oracle or like pinging an acolyte or something is really just not that good a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think Gnome Feratu is ultimately a pretty bad card and is pretty much just a River Crocodilisk, except River Crocodilisk is at least a beast.
And what's worse about this is not even a demon.
Yeah, it isn't. So, which seems a bit weird. But, maybe for them vampires are not demons. I suppose that kind of
Yeah,
seems
it's a
kind of
vampire, right? So yeah,
it,
okay, so it's not. You can kind of argue whether it's meant to be a
lore-wise, yeah.
yeah law
But
wise, yeah.
gameplay-wise, it's gonna be a one from me.
Yeah, like I say, it's a card that sounds amazing, right?
Yes, in the dreamland where you hit the right things, but
Exactly.
ultimately not that good. So,
Yeah.
also a one from you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, a one, unfortunately. I
Okay,
wanted to believe.
I don't. I hate the idea of the card as much as like I think it's bad. Anyway, next we have Despicable Dreadlord. So Despicable Dreadlord, most definitely a demon, a 5 mana 4/5 demon, a rare, and it has at the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. So essentially a kind of Maelstrom portal that happens at the end of your turn in a way. You're obviously paying an overcosted price for this Despicable Dreadlord at 5 mana 4/5, but the effect is pretty powerful. What are your thoughts on the card?
Uh, it's a kind of card that I kind of go, but wait, isn't this supposed to be in Warrior? You
Yeah,
know?
but Warrior would be to all of your minions. To all minions, right? This is enemy minions only.
Yeah. So I mean, so the fact is like a 5 mana 4/5. It's a bit expensive. The
It
effect is
is, but
obviously decent.
I mean, you're mostly playing this for the effect, right? And if you
Yeah.
think of if the effect hits 1 minion, in terms of stat swing on the board, it is a 5 mana 5/6.
Yeah. I mean, in
Well,
that regard,
not five
yes.
six, a 5 mana 5/5.
So I mean, in that regard, yes. It's still not a card that like, when you talk about like, it's still not a demon. I still think Dread Inferno is probably better.
Dread Infernal does have the battle cry version kind of this effect, except that it obviously hits your stuff as well, which can
Yeah,
hurt.
and it's a 6 mana 6/6.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Despicable Dreadlord, I think it's a pretty decent card. I don't think it's going to see play, as I really don't think that it has that much space in any real good kind of deck. So, I mean, Despicable Dreadlord, I think it's going to be a 2 for me. I think it's better than, your Treacheries and Gnome Feratus, but
Yeah. Okay. It's okay.
it's
Yeah.
really just not a particularly good card. Uh,
Okay. Yeah. When you count like that, yes, I will go. Okay, it is better then.
yeah,
Like, so I'll put it as like a 2.
yeah.
It's not completely unplayable, but like, I'll be interested to see that it will require a very interesting deck to make it work. I think
Yeah.
is
And
kind of what
speaking of cards that are going to require interesting decks, I suppose, we have Unwilling Sacrifice, a 3 mana rare spell for Warlock, and it reads choose a friendly minion, destroy it, and a random enemy minion. So,
it's kind of it feels like in a similar vein to Treachery, right?
yeah,
Um, a similar sort of
you have to
uh,
play a deck with a minion you're happy to
you
give
want to
up
get rid of. Right?
for the
What-
random destruction of an enemy minion, not even targeted. And
yeah,
and to be honest, a lot of the times I'm kind of going, why would I play Unwilling Sacrifice over Blood Crystal Potion, right? Blood Crystal Potion, I get to
exactly.
choose the minion, and even though I lose a mana, losing a mana but keeping a minion on board is probably better most of the time, is it not?
And also, I mean, you can even look at it even similarly to, I mean, a 3 mana. Think of Shadow Bolt. So Shadow Bolt kills most mid-range
Yeah,
threats. So obviously, this can potentially kill something really big, but the fact is, it needs to be the only big thing,
yep,
right? Like, there can't be a token, there can't be a 1/1, there can't be, So this immediately, the decks that this kind of strikes has been quite bad against is decks like Shaman and
yeah,
Paladin,
and
which
Druid.
are and token dread
But even
and
Jade
wait
Druid, it's not good against.
and wait, those are kind of the most popular strongest decks right now, and
Yeah,
obviously the meta is going to change, but I don't expect those decks to all of a sudden become those classes to be not good anymore. So
yeah.
I don't foresee this, and the fact that it's a random enemy minion and you have to, I mean, okay, maybe if you choose a death rattle, like what death rattles like deal damage to the whole board, or you know
Um,
you don't have explosive
Abomination.
ship anymore. Abomination, but Abomination is quite bad by itself.
Yes.
So that's kind of the
It's a
thing.
terrible combo. I was just answering your question about dealing damage to the board. Yeah, ultimately, I think Unwilling Sacrifice, I'm going to be pretty unwilling to actually put it in any kind of deck.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing out the obvious.
I see what
Uh,
you did.
yeah, so it's going to be a 1 from me.
You're not you're not going to be willing. You're not going to be willing to make an unwilling sacrifice.
No, I'm not going to be willing to sacrifice any slots in my deck to put this in,
Yeah,
or
that's
any minions.
unless there's some cards that miraculously support it, which it's always a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is it scales better in the late game versus Shadow Bolt, but ultimately, it's still a 1 for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that one as well.
Not a great start so far for Warlock, I must say.
Unfortunately, like,
Yeah,
compared to some of the other classes that don't have any of the juice, in my
yeah.
opinion, you know.
But the one card they do have that does look kind of promising is Defile. This is a 2 mana rare Warlock spell, and it reads deal 1 damage to all minions. If any die, cast this again. So the way that would work is if you have a 1/1 on board, your opponent has a 2/2, you have a 3/3. Well, Defile's going to kill deal 1 damage to the whole board, kill your 1/1, then it'll be cast again, and now it'll kill the 2/2 because it dealt 1 damage and then 1 again, and then it's going to be cast again, and it's going to kill the 3/3.
Yeah,
So that's kind of the idea, right? Defile keeps casting as long as it keeps killing things, and that's a pretty powerful effect. I mean, we see Maelstrom Portal sees a lot of play. Obviously, the downside is Defile is symmetrical rather than only on your opponent's side of the board, and that can definitely hurt when you're trying to use a card like Defile to take over the board. But on the other side, you can actually use your minions to help make Defile happen repeatedly, right? If they have a
yeah.
1/1 and a 3/3 on the board, you can play a 2/2 and Defile, and then that will clear the whole board.
The problem though also is like against like decks like especially Warrior comes to mind. Dealing 1 damage, is going to be a bit awkward, right? You don't
Yeah,
really want to
sure,
be
I
dealing one
suppose.
damage to all minions. And imagine, you give them all the value, right?
In some warrior decks, sure. I mean, against pirate warrior, to me, the biggest downside of this is there's lots of 1 health minions to kill, but there's no real 2 health minions to kill. So you have to kind of bridge the gap yourself. And then there's quite a few 3 health and quite a few 4 health minions. But I feel like at that 2 health slot, it's hard to get this to combo all the way up. Especially later when you want it to actually clear multiple minions. So
Yeah.
I think that is one of the problems with the file. It can be used alongside stuff like Hellfire as well or something like that in order to, help enable it later in the game. And I think one of the best combos with Defile is Bloodmage Thalnos as well. So you can
Yeah.
use Bloodmage Thalnos plus Defile means the first Defile will deal 2 damage, killing Thalnos, meaning that it will then cast again, and I'm pretty sure it will, because it casts the spell again, Thalnos will actually die first. So the second Defile won't get the spell damage buff, but you'll then be dealing another 1 damage to all minions, so then you can be able to kill any 3 health minions. So, there are some neat synergies with that. Also, killing the Thalnos draws you a card at least, replacing the Thalnos.
Yeah, that's true
So,
as well.
the Defile is, I think, a pretty interesting card and can have a lot of utilization in Warlock, but ultimately, the big question remains to me whether the Warlock deck to support it is there.
Yeah, this is actually very, very true. It's you know, like we say, it sounds great, but and as we've gone through the other Warlock cards, we constantly go, okay, do we see these in control decks? And having Gul'dan and a Defile in a deck, and you've got to have other cards as well,
Yeah,
which are yeah.
yeah.
So
So, Defile, I think it's like I want to give it a 3 simply because I think it is the best, almost the best of the Warlock cards. But ultimately, the big question is if Warlock and Control Warlocks in particular are not seeing play, then it isn't going to see play. But if the archetype is going to be supported, I think it will be very popular in those decks. So it's like almost a 4, I would say, if Control Warlock is a viable archetype. But otherwise, I'm just gonna kind of give it a 3. It kind of breaks the how we really want to do our rating system in how it was described, but really it's just kind of hard to place it, right? It's like it's a 3 because this archetype is probably not good, but if the archetype is good, I think it will be a key part of it.
yeah,
Yeah. So what would your rating be?
yeah. Like, I would give rated a 2 because I don't see a deck that's it's going to be in, right?
Okay, fair enough.
That's kind of where I'm putting it at.
Okay. And speaking of cards that are hard to find decks for, you want to tell us about Howlfiend?
Halfiend. Okay, it's a 3 mana 3/6 minion. Whenever this minion takes damage, discard a random card. So this is, kind of they're trying to. It looks like they're trying to support the quest again.
Yeah.
uh,
And the sort of other discard synergies we see with
yeah,
stuff like
3 mana
Blood Queen
3/6
Lanathol.
is quite good. I mean, stats wise,
Yeah.
but uh, you know, the fact that this is kind of like a bit of Hydra in a way.
Yeah, except it costs you all the resources in your hand, right? And if you're
Yeah,
playing Howlfiend early, you're likely still have quite a few resources in your hand, right? If you're playing this on 3, which is where it's by far at its most powerful, well, then you most likely are going to discard 2, maybe 3 cards, and now you actually have cards in your hand because it's only turn 3 and it's very unlikely you've been able to sort of dump your whole hand. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is for some kind of maybe discard zoo where you actually do have a lot of cheap minions you can dump, as well as not worrying so much about losing cards from your hand. They're maybe not the highest value cards. Then maybe a Halfine can kind of find a place. There's obviously the shenanigans you can do with Treachery, where you can give your opponent Halfiend and then find some kind of defile board where you can deal a bunch of instances of damage to Halfine and cause your opponent to discard their whole hand. But that's such a
Yeah.
minuscule probability of happening sort
And
of
then you might
combo
just
that
buy to
it's
the 3/6 as well, right?
yeah,
That's always
that
the awkward
it
part.
really just doesn't seem worth it.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
Halfiend is gonna be a 1, maybe bordering on a 2 for me, but a
solid
1, solid
one.
1. I
It's
still
not.
think the for the zoo deck that doesn't care about its hand, it can kind of work, but even then, it's every time you draw a card, you're gonna discard it basically because Halfiend is gonna get damaged during your opponent's turn if it's still on the board, kind of thing. And then next we have Drain Soul. Drain Soul is a 2 mana common Warlock spell, um, which has Lifesteal and deal 2 damage to a minion. So essentially a smaller version of Drain Life, which is 3 mana to deal 2 damage. Well, smaller in terms of mana cost, to deal 2 damage and gain 2 life.
I
But
think the only difference is this can't you can't hit a minion. I mean, you can't hit the
can't hit
face.
face. Yeah, that's true. There is a other notable difference in that lifesteal is directly attached to the damage you deal. So if Drained Soul is buffed by spell powers such as Blood Mage Thalnos
Oh
or something
yes.
like that, then it will actually deal 3 damage and gain you 3 life. Whereas Drain Life doesn't actually do that. It just spell power would buff the damage it does, but never the life gain. So that's a big difference between Drain Soul and Drain Life. And I think Drain Soul is actually just a lot more powerful. Most of the time, you're going to be casting Drain Life on a minion anyway. And I think Drain Soul's effect is pretty powerful. Uh, More often than not, you're going to be able to remove minions. We don't see a lot of 2/3s these days. Um,
Yeah.
there are quite a few 3 health minions running around, though. But I think Drain Soul's effect is pretty powerful, especially for a class like Warlock, where lifesteal can be very important, as it kind of translates to the amount of times they can use their hero power, and leverage that to actually gain a resource advantage.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I think like, but this once again, this is the kind of card that I would say fits into a control deck, and the question is, will there be a control warlock to support it? Because I don't think Zoo wants a card like that.
yeah, I don't think it's impossible for Zoo, right? As a way of getting back on the board in a way, as like Zoo kind of lacks that ways to actually interact with the board from hand if they're not already on board. But ultimately, I agree it is more of a control warlock, something that probably finds its way more into a control warlock, which definitely seems, based on the cards we've been reviewing, something they're trying to push. They've not really given Zoo much support, but ultimately, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a particularly viable strategy. Sort of,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm not.
the warlock deck doesn't really seem quite there.
Yeah, I have to agree there. Like for me, it's a case of it's a good card. I don't think there's a deck for it yet.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 3, simply because I think it's around there with Defile. But once again, and we'll touch on this at the end when we sort of discuss where Warlock's gonna be. But ultimately, I don't really think we are gonna see too much of it. But if we are seeing much control Warlock, I think Drain Soul will be a relatively important part of those decks.
Exactly. It will basically do what like Dark Bomb did, I think, a lot of the time, except without that burst of face potential. I
Yeah.
mean, that will be the only real difference I will see.
Well, I mean, also it gains you life, which is pretty
Yeah.
important in Warlock.
What I'm saying is that you can't use it, to like double Dark Bomb
Yes.
their face, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, and the last card we have for Warlock is Sanguine Ravello. So Sanguine Ravello is a 1 mana 1/1 with Battle Cry, destroy a friendly minion, and gain +2/+2. So eat a minion, get +2/+2. It's a 1 mana 3/3. I mean, theoretically that seems pretty good, but the question you really have to ask yourself is, what are we eating with the battle cry that's making it worthwhile, right? There aren't really many. We're not really in a meta where we have Nerubian eggs. They're not in standard, and the kind of options to eat are maybe not that great. You could eat something like a possessed villager. You know, possessed villager coins Sanguine Ravello on one could be kind of powerful. You're getting 4/4 stats on turn one. Seems pretty good. But also, there's so many cards that are aiming to deal with 3 health minions right now that Sanguine Reveler also struggles with that. Lots of
Yeah,
weapons that deal 3 damage. You have
and
Frostbolts,
ultimately,
Medivh's Valets.
also the thing you got to think about is, most of the times this is not actually a 1 mana 3/3. It's more 3 or 4. Because you're playing with its Devastator egg or something to try and. I mean, even if you play with the what you call it, the possessed villager.
Yeah. It's 2 mana for a 3/3 and a 1/1, pretty much, rather
Yeah,
than, you know. So you have to factor that in, and like any tempo advantage you're kind of gaining from the 1 mana 3/3, so to speak, you're losing by also having to sacrifice something that's on board, right? And that is a concern. There's some sneaky synergies with stuff like um, corruption, or not corruption. What's the board wide corruption? I forgot its name now. But
oh, the corrupting mists.
corrupting mist, yeah. But ultimately, if you're doing that whilst corrupting mist because your opponent's board is decent, then it's not really going to work because Sanguine Reveler is just going to get traded off by that board. So even that kind of a synergy doesn't really work.
Yeah,
So
it's like a Void Terror. I mean, if we think of it this way, how much play has Void Terror ever seen? The
oh
most it saw
yeah,
was with the Rubian eggs.
yeah, and that was because Nerubian Egg was
Yeah, and
a
it was
good part that helped make it playable. Whereas also I think losing power overwhelming has made a lot of these effects a lot worse because you could power overwhelming a minion, trade, and then use your void terror, and you've gained a lot of stats because of that. As well as just eating a minion that you've power overwhelming means you're not getting the downside as much of the fact that the minion would die at the end of your turn anyway, right? And
yeah,
without those kind of effects, Sanguine Reveler really struggles. Like, the best case scenario at the moment in standard is pretty much Sanguine Reveler on Devil's Egg, and then you get a 3/3 and a 5/5. But that's still a relatively slow 2 card combo. You're not going to have it in hand very often, and maybe Sanguine Reveler doesn't necessarily have great value like from that. I mean, there's also Firefly, I suppose. You can eat the Flame Elemental, but you still have to spend the mana to do that.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. And another thing, Sanguine Reveler isn't a demon. At least Halfiend had the fact that it was a demon going for it, I suppose. Whereas Sanguine Reveler doesn't have a demon, and that demon synergy is quite important a lot of the time for Warlock, especially like the Zulocks, where you want to maybe have something like the 4 mana 5/4 that gives +1/+1 to all demons, so it's Battlecry. I forget its name, but there are some synergies that would help those kind of decks. So Sanguine Reveler, I'm gonna be giving it a 2. I think that even in Zoo, it would probably not find the cut, and I don't even think Zoo is gonna be particularly good. But even if Zoo did see play, I don't think Sanguine Reveler would be something we'd see in Zoo most of the time. So, I think maybe it's gonna see some fringe play, people trying to pull off some interesting some combos with it, but ultimately I don't think it's particularly good.
yeah. I have to agree with you there. I think.
So also a 2 for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And now we have the more interesting parts. We're going to come to the Warlock deck lists that we have. So we have 3 different Warlock deck lists here with sort of 3 different ideas to them. First off, we have this aggressive Zoo-ish kind of Warlock that you've provided us. Do you want to talk us a little bit through the deck?
So basically, once again, like flashback to like there's an older Zoo deck which was a lot more charge orientated. So this foregoes some of the more, let's say, board orientated options that Zoo has, and basically it's going for a lot more charge damage. So you've got the Leroy, you've got Wolf Riders, you've got the Blue Gear Warriors, and basically this deck is now you've got in the case of the what's it, Arcris Veteran.
Yeah.
Um, this is a very I think this is It's very similar in a lot of ways to your Abusive Sergeant.
Do you want
Uh,
to tell us a bit about what it actually
Archerist
does? 'Cause we
Veteran.
haven't got to the neutrals quite yet.
It's a 2 mana. No, it's a 1 mana 2/1 minion. Battlecry. Give a friendly minion +1 attack. So it's important to note that the buff is permanent
Yeah.
and it's a 1 mana 2/1.
Yeah.
So it's still not a bad one drop if you don't have anything else to play, which is
Yeah.
always like an important thing to note. And that the fact that it gives any charge thing a little bit of extra, gives you that little bit of extra reach potentially.
Yeah, or
And
enables trades in sort of the same way Abusive Sergeant used to. The biggest issue is that it's
exactly,
just not as good for trades because it's only giving one attack rather than two, which is pretty
exactly.
important for trades a lot of the time. And secondly, the buff being permanent means you're not really getting the best value out of it by trading.
Yeah. Another card I've included that I know you and Zaymok don't like is the Reg Tiller. And so now this is obviously going with that face plan of, I mean, whenever this, it's a 1 mana 1/1. Whenever this minion attacks, deal 2 damage to the enemy heroes. So if you play this on turn 1 and you attack on turn 2, you've paid 1 mana to deal 3 damage.
Sounds like a great a great pie in the sky scenario because if you play this card on any turn except one, it's just gonna die without
Yeah,
getting to attack. And you know the
yeah, that's
comparison with Wretched Tiller is
Lepanome in a way, I think.
Lepanome, but Lepanome
Is guaranteed.
is at
This
least guaranteed to hit the damage. Yeah, this isn't
this
guaranteed.
potentially has repeat. Like
Sure.
if you can somehow keep it alive, like this can just, I mean, if this attacks once or twice, it's pretty good, right?
If it attacks once, it's fine. If it
Two
attacks
is start.
twice, it becomes pretty
It's
good.
pretty,
Yeah.
but it's crazy, crazy. Like so, that's the whole idea. Obviously, you want this early on, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the idea is you can hopefully try and protect it a little bit in the early game, but ultimately, I don't really know if Richard Tiller is going to work. It definitely does help satisfy those aggressive game plans, but at 1/1, it kind of fights for the board very poorly, and that's actually kind of important for aggressive decks right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so ultimately, I'm not really sure on the deck, but it is definitely one direction you could take Warlock to try and help,
Go all in.
exploit. Yeah, yeah, to exploit, some decks that are particularly greedy or weak to a very aggressive opening.
Yeah, I mean, like the problem when you think about these decks is you always got to ask yourself, okay, is it going to be better than Pirate Warrior? Is it going to be better than
Token Druid.
Token Druid? Is it going to be better than And that's always sort of the I mean, these are honestly the questions you got to go ask yourself, and then you got to go, wait, maybe it isn't.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then next we have a very different deck, sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum. We have this Bloodbloom Doom esque warrior. So, what is it that I mean, sorry, warlock. What is it that's sort of made you think maybe this is a deck?
So basically, this is me trying to, make. So obviously, like people have been trying, most notably people like players like Stan Sifka have been trying to make Blood Bloom, work
Yeah,
as a card, and I mean, 10 points to them. But I was kind of like, okay, I looked at that show, I was like, okay, maybe, let's see if I can, like we were talking about earlier, see if we can make the whole, treachery, kind of vibe work, right?
yeah,
Let's see if we can. So that's what this kind of tries to do. I run Defile, I run like the Twisted Nether, and obviously the combos are like Blood Bloom with the board sweepers.
yeah,
And I mean, yeah, so I'm not quite sold. I mean, it's kind of an idea. I'm not sure if it's a good idea.
yeah. It just doesn't really feel like it does a lot of the control things better than a lot of the other decks. Very much sort of falling prey to the same thing we were talking about with the aggressive Warlock, right? Is why would you play this over a lot of other control decks? And the only real argument is because it has a ton of board clear and the Dooms and
The Blood Bloom
Twisting
plus Bloom
Nether.
combo is obviously quite strong.
Yeah,
Uh,
but ultimately, I agree, probably not a particularly great deck. And speaking of not particularly great decks, I also have here a sort of Highlander type priest. Sorry, priest. A Highlander type warlock that I sort of built here. So the idea is with cards like Defile and Drain Soul and even Blood Queen Lanathal and sorry, even Despicable Dreadlord, we can kind of maybe find enough spaces in our deck to go for that singleton idea again. The deck also has Blood Reaver Gul'dan in as a kind of finisher, with cards like Cruel that also can benefit from the singleton by bringing all your demons from your hand onto the board, and then you commit heavy to the board. They kind of clear the board, and then you bring Blood Reaver Gul'dan to bring the, bring your demons back. And with the Blood Queen Lanathor, we do have that kind of issue we spoke about earlier. We have a control deck that has Blood Queen Lanathor here, and that's a bit tricky. We do have the Lakari Fellhounds as well as the Doom Guards, because those have such good synergy with Blood Reaver Gul'dan, as long as you're not discarding Blood Reaver Gul'dan. Um, that's kind of why those are in the deck, but they do kind of, as a side, also help Blood Queen Lanathor a bit, as she can maybe get up to 3 or 4 attack, as well as obviously the single Soulfire that's good for your tempo plays. We would also have the Defile Blood Mage Thalnos combo, which we spoke about a bit earlier, but ultimately this deck does have a lot of flex spots, being a sort of Kazakus deck here. Kazakus, the
The
main
whole deck
reason
is a
for.
flex. The entire deck is off flex spots, basically, right?
Well, yeah, except Kazakus and Blood River Gul'dan, and yes, but I mean the point is, there's a lot of ways you can tech the deck, as we saw back in the day with Reno Lock, to be specific to a lot of metas. This does have quite a lot of healing in as well. The Ring Farseers and Gluttonous Users, as well as Drained Soul is healing, and the Blood Queen Lanathol. So yeah, it's a thought, at least a sort of thought experiment, I would call the deck. It might be possible to build this kind of deck if we can find a meta where Kazakus is a good enough payoff alone. And the question really there does remain is Kazakus a good enough payoff? And is a deck like this actually now, with maybe enough of these tools, going to be reliable enough to really work? And ultimately, probably no, but
Yeah, I was gonna
it
say, you know what the
is.
deck is missing? Reno Jackson.
Yeah, yeah, Reno would certainly help, and I think the deck would be very strong then. But Reno no longer in standard, and that's going to mean
Yeah,
that this kind of a deck is not that great. Blood River Gul'dan, does maybe have those applications in Wild, but this review
yeah.
isn't really focused on Wild, so we're not going to speak too much about that. So summing up Warlock, where do you think Warlock are going to be, sort of in the whole meta?
I still think it's going to be pretty garbage in the garbage tier
Yeah,
of.
I would say Warlock is probably still going to remain relatively non-existent. Um, and this is none of the cards we've really seen have been, I think, good enough to push Warlock. There's maybe some hope for some kind of control archetypes, whether they be singleton type archetypes, or trying to use that synergy of like Blood Bloom Doom a bit more, maybe with Blood River Gul'dan as some kind of late game. But ultimately, I think those decks are actually going to more rest on Drain Soul and Defile to carry them than the big legendaries like Blood River Gul'dan. So, yep, uh, Warlock I think still going to remain pretty garbage for now, and unfortunately not really looking great for Warlock fans. But Warlock has been a very strong deck for a very strong class for a very long time. So it's
Yeah, it's
not
kind
it's
of,
not the most missed class in the meta, I would say.
you kind of got to go. They've had their time, right?
Yeah. I mean, ideally we would like a meta with all 9 classes viable, but at the moment, Warlock being the unwilling sacrifice of the meta at the
Oh no,
moment
get
is
that.
perfectly fine with me, because we've had such a good meta, and I don't want them to ruin it by just pushing really strong Warlock cards like we've seen them do before previously with, let's say, Shaman or something like that. So yeah, I think Warlock still going to be pretty poor. And yeah, that's all we really have to say about Warlock. Please like, subscribe on YouTube and Twitch, and you can follow us at DalePon and at Dib_gaming on Twitter to find out more, or to give us feedback if you think we're wrong about Warlock. Maybe you have a really good Zoo or Aggro Warlock or Control Warlock or something new that we haven't found. Let
Yeah,
us
maybe.
know in the comments or on Twitter. So thanks a lot. Cheerio.